So 6 years when I was really young, well, 7 almost in Korea. And then we moved back to the Philippines for 3 years and then 6 years again in Egypt. So in my time frame, so we have this thing called the TCK alarm clock. So some people moved every 2 years. So that's their TCK alarm clock. But for me, it was 6 years. So at some point after completing college and going to the workforce, I was feeling my 6 year alarm clock go off when I was an adult in Korea. And I remember thinking like, this feels something's wrong. Like I need to do something. I need to go on an adventure. I need to go do something new now because my body doesn't know how to settle. Settling equals only 6 years and not more than that. But as an adult, but like during that 6 year mark, I was slowly starting to withdraw from the people around me. And I was wondering what that was about. And I was like, I mean, I don't plan to move anytime soon. I really liked where I was. I was studying, I was working, I was with a community of people that I've known all throughout college. And so I was like, what's going on here? And I realized later on, as I'm understanding these things, the TCK alarm clock was going off in me because in my head, that was when you're supposed to say goodbye. That's the time you're making these big goodbyes with all these people that you knew long time ago. And then what ended up happening was once I realized that, I didn't have the terms for it then. I just knew that it was familiar. And so that was the time where I was withdrawing. And then when people wanted to get closer to me, because that's usually how it takes like a long period of time to get to know people, at least the non-TCK way, because if you're a TCK and you meet another TCK, you just want to spill all of your who you are and want to get to know them because you don't know, this time is precious. You don't know when you're leaving. And so some people respond to it by like, this is who I am. We're going to get we're going to get connected, but then don't know how to do long-term relationships. Or you could be the one who just doesn't make relationships at all because it's so painful to constantly have to make your relationships. So with that said, it took a lot of realization and therapy at that point to realize I wasn't making deep friendships because I kept pushing them away at this mark, or at least my body was thinking that this was normal. And so for a lot of TCKs, it might be the same thing. They might go into relationships, romantic relationships, and they're like, let's say they moved around like 3 years. Every 3 years, they would go into a new relationship or they would get engaged around that time because they don't understand stability. Chaos is so much more familiar to us TCKs because it's like, okay, I know how to pack the boxes. I know what room to put these boxes in. I know how to travel. I know how to pack. I know how to unpack. But when things start to get mundane and normal, oftentimes TCKs can feel like something's wrong. I need to go on an adventure. I need to go on that exciting, thing that I used to go to as kids. And I find that the mundane is so much harder for me because I want new things. Like I was talking to my roommate about this a couple weeks ago, and I find myself like every single week I need to have new dishes, like new things to eat. Not that that's a bad thing, but like cuisine wise, like I'm trying all these different things like Korean, Japanese, like Western food always needs to be something new, or I need to try something new that's a part of that would make me really happy because that's what I'm used to, like trying new things constantly. But yeah, like I think in relationships, oftentimes that being a TCK is like this added layer because what part of that is very Korean? What part of that is very Western? And I find myself, even with among TCK friends, they'll say something or do something. I'd be like, that's very European of you. I can see that. Like, that's very German of you, or that's very like British of you to do that. Like, I have a friend that grew up she's a TCK as well. She's Korean, but grew up in Poland. And her friends would tell her, that's so European of you. And she's like, what? By removing, she doesn't like the sandwich bread. And so she's like, it's too much bread for the content. And her Korean friends would be like, oh, that's so European of you. So that added layer for someone to get to know us, it's like different parts of the world. And I think that's what complicates things sometimes because someone who's lived in one place their whole lives may not always understand that. They kind of just take that and be like, okay, this is a part of who that person is, but isn't like they can't find consistency almost because sometimes if somebody grew up in one place their whole lives, what ends up happening is they're like, oh, okay, you grew up in that place. I can kind of understand that culture and take notes of what's happening with that person that you're getting to know in a dating relationship or even in marriage. But with a TCK, that's like chopped up in a whole bunch of different countries. And how do you navigate that? How does one person who's from all these different countries, someone who isn't marrying a TCK, navigate through that? And also for a TCK, what does it mean understanding their needs about them finding comfort in one place? Like that's definitely a conversation couples should have about the things that they're experiencing. Like, what happens if the TCK wants to constantly go on adventures and go travel to different cities, but the person who they're marrying that's not a TCK prefers, like, maybe their idea of traveling is going to the next town over and trying something new. And the TCK might be like, that's not enough.
What's your personal experience? Because I mean, I understand, like, for me, and I've mentioning this on different sources, social media and so on. Like, for me, it's like moving abroad, making friends abroad, all of this is leaving my comfort zone. Why else I feel for you, it's just super normal because this is what you've done your whole life almost. And you don't have to push yourself to do so because it's your identity. It's almost in your blood. It's your DNA. So I'm wondering, for someone who is so spontaneous and who's so adventurous, who has this time clock of 7 years it is, you said, right? Where you just like feel like, okay, I'm ready for something new now. Let's just start from scratch again and do something completely different in a different country. The first time you were aware of when it comes to, I mean, in your case, I feel like that could be an interesting topic as well. But when it comes to, for example, cultural differences and dating someone from another country, I feel like people, obviously, they always try, when knowing where someone is coming from. Like, I'm from Germany, okay. Not only does she look German, but most likely she loves bread. Yes, it's true. I love bread, for example. Like, so people stereotype, people try to put you in a specific corner in their mind, and it's not even, they're not doing it out of being evil, mean, or so whatever. It's just how our brains function, depending on the way you grew up, obviously, as well. So your upgrowing is just different due to that you've moved so many times, that you got in contact with so many different cultures, so many different languages. Your group of friends, I assume, is also quite intercultural. So you have a lot of interests to how you grew up. And I just feel like if you are dating someone from another country, which, yes, there might be a cultural difference, but what does it mean for you? Like, how do you pinpoint out, like, okay, that's this part of myself, and that's this part of myself, and this is where it's coming from. Because you not only have to be aware of it yourself, but you also have to somehow communicate it to your partner when dating to make yourself understandable. I hope that makes sense right now. But you see, like, everyone who's listening and who's watching right now, I'm just trying to find words for it, because in my mind I'm just like, whoa, that's so complex. Like, I'm just dating an Argentinian and I'm German. Like, in our case, it's pretty clear what type of behavior is coming from. And obviously we're changing over time, especially when moving abroad, we're meeting new people. But in our core, it's there. And for you, it's just so different. So I'm really wondering, the first time you've realized that your upbringing is playing a huge role within your relationship, how did it feel for you? How did you communicate it? And how did you grow this self-awareness on being able to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, and basically trying to give the person you love an idea of who you are?
Wow, that's a lot of that's a lot. The first thing that kind of comes to mind of an actual, because I don't think there was one experience in where I realized that it's affecting the way that I do life. I always kind of embrace the difference in me, and because when I was outside of the Philippines, I was also part of an expat community or an international community. So it didn't feel that different to be with a whole bunch of people from different countries. So I don't necessarily think it affected me in a way until I came back to the Philippines. So kind of funny. That's when I started seeing that, because I think the first thing a third culture kid wants to do oftentimes is to assimilate and to blend into that culture. That's why oftentimes we're called cultural chameleons, because we just try to blend into that culture. But if you do that so often, you kind of lose a part of who you are, because for people who've grown up in one place their whole lives, they're able to freely explore different things about themselves. They're like, oh, maybe I want to go into theater. Maybe I want to go into basketball. They're able to do that because they have the stability of the same place, the same house. Everything else is safe. Every aspect of their life is still the same. But for us third culture kids, most of the stuff in our lives changes. So even if you move from one country to the other, are you able to even have basketball as your extracurricular activities? Does the local school that you're going to even have that as an availability? How do you find that? How do you even know that's what you want to do compared to somebody who's lived in one place their whole lives, who have the ability to explore different things? Someone who's moved around constantly, all those networks get cut off other than their nuclear family, unless there's another family that you know from other places. So it's new school. It's like hitting the reset button of your life. And so we don't often get the chance to explore fully who we are because we're constantly changing. Like we're changing who we are to fit in sometimes. Or if we stay who we are, we have to accept the fact that people aren't going to understand that. So that's a lot of mental possible turmoil and trauma on a child. And that actually does something to our brains. Going back to the question where you asked, when did I realize it affected me? I'm trying to think back to something that might have happened. I think it was when I was moving to the Philippines because so this is after college and grad school. Like I lived in Korea as an adult for 10 years at this point, and I think I've solidified my identity at that point already as an adult where I'm like, I am this way. I am a third culture kid. This is okay. I didn't have all the vocabulary then, but I've just kind of embraced it. I'm a Filipino that grew up in Korea and Egypt and now living in Korea. That was kind of like my identity at that point, and I've learned to embrace a whole bunch of different things. But when I moved to the Philippines later on in my late 20s, that's when I understood myself because more. And I don't think it was negatively affecting it. It was hitting a cultural wall, if I may, because the people that I was talking to, they just don't understand. They just don't understand the fact that I need to constantly eat different foods or the constant need to go on different trips. I found certain relatives were like saying that I'm wasting my money. Why can't I just save? Why can't I? And like, it's like they're playing different rules to a game that I never understood. Like they had all these rules and they wanted me to follow them, but I didn't have that frame of reference because that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And sometimes my relatives just didn't understand that. And they're still trying to conform me to be a certain way. There's just so much about being a third culture kid where it takes time. And it wasn't until I met other third culture kids, like other diplomat kids, where we realized, oh, this is a shared experience being a diplomat kid. You know, the fact that we feel like we need to be properly mannered in front of a table. And I remember sitting having dinner with other Filipino diplomat kids, and we just sat there quietly eating the first like couple seconds. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's because this is our upbringing. You know, you sit in silence while you eat kind of thing, or even using the fork and spoon properly and understanding how this works. And that is a shared diplomatic experience, at least for some of the diplomat kids that I grew up with, which I just find so funny because someone can come in and be like, oh, you're eating so properly. It's so posh of you to like eat so properly. And I was like, no, you were just kind of trained to do this as children because we had to eat with foreign dignitaries, you know, and we needed to be eating with our proper manners. And, you know, in the Philippines, people sometimes still eat with their hands, and that's fine. That's part of culture. But like, I don't know how much of it that I can do.